So I am leaving San Francisco. To my channel. My name is Amanda. If you're new here, let me give you some background. I moved to San Francisco about a year and a half ago. I moved here in March of 2021, and I moved here for a job. I'm a reporter at KRON 4 in San Francisco.
KRON 4's Amanda Harry. She joins us live now from the scene.
The TV station is based here in San Francisco, but it covers news all over the Bay Area. Also, this is my dog Carson. If you could see him in the corner, he's just sort of sitting here with me. But I work at KRON 4 in San Francisco, and I will start out by just saying I am still going to be working at KRON 4 in San Francisco. I'm not actually leaving the Bay Area, but I am leaving the city of San Francisco. So when I moved here, it was the middle of the pandemic, and I moved here sight unseen. And I found an apartment within a certain amount of distance of the station, so I could be close to the station. And that's where I've lived the entire year and a half I've been here. But when I moved here, things were different because the pandemic changed things. It was a much quieter time here. It was easier to drive. It was easier to park. A lot of that has changed now that things are sort of getting back to normal, which is great. It's great to see things back to normal. But because things were a little bit different for a long time, I didn't really know what things were going to look like here in San Francisco. And I did like living here, and if you're considering moving to San Francisco, there are some great things about the city. And I definitely think if it's something you really feel that you want to do, it is good to do at some point. It's good to live in a big city, to see what that's like, and not to have to wonder if that's something you want to do or something that you would like. So that was a plus, and I'm glad I did it. But when I moved here, everything was still very much closed because of COVID. Not completely closed, but nothing was working at capacity. Everything was just different. Everything was still masked. Everything was limited hours. And because of that, I ended up exploring the East Bay more because I was looking for things with more hours, especially the gym. The gym is a big thing for me. If you're new to this channel and you look at some of my other videos, you'll see a lot of them have to do with CrossFit, because CrossFit and fitness are two things that I'm very passionate about, and living a healthy lifestyle. So I ended up having to find that outside of the city because the city was just doing everything masked and limited capacity. And with my job and my schedule, it was very hard to, one, meet people, just make friends at other places, and two, even attend CrossFit classes because they didn't have them at the times that I wasn't working or like still sleeping because I get off of work at 11 o'clock. So a 6 a.m. CrossFit class doesn't really work for me because I just wouldn't be getting enough sleep. So I ended up going out to the East Bay, and that's where I found my current gym, Diablo CrossFit, and that's in the Walnut Creek, Concord, Pleasant Hill, Martinez area, Contra Costa County of Northern California. And once I went out there, I've found that I've connected with a lot of people out there. I really like the lifestyle out there. It's just a little bit, I wouldn't necessarily say slower, but you just have more flexibility. You have more space. You can go places a little bit more easily. I think something you have to consider if you're thinking about moving to San Francisco is that you're kind of stuck in your neighborhood. You can Uber or Lyft to another neighborhood, but it's a big enough city that you're not going to be walking across the whole thing. And public transportation just isn't great. It's not super safe. I've done a lot of stories about stabbings on BART, shootings on BART, just bodies found on BART. Some of those are just people experiencing homelessness that passed, but it's just not the safest place to be. If you're going rush hour when everyone else is going, it's gonna be crowded, but it is probably a little bit safer than if you're like me and you work off hours and you're going to be on the trains at night, late at 11 o'clock. It's just a little bit unsafe. So that's part of the problem I found about living in the city. I actually felt limited by it. I felt like I couldn't go anywhere. It's very difficult to park. So I moved here from Oklahoma, and in Oklahoma, I had parking. I had a car. I needed a car. You can't live, you can live in Oklahoma without a car, but it'd be very difficult for me to get to work and to do the things I needed to do. I also was a morning reporter there, so I had to get to work at 3:30 in the morning, and it's probably a little bit difficult to find an Uber or Lyft at that time, and I lived too far from the station to walk. It was like 8 miles. So I needed a car there. And then I moved here, and I drove here with my whole life in my car. And I could have thought about getting rid of my car, but then I ended up going out into the East Bay and meeting a lot of people there. That's where my friends are. All the humans I care about are there. And I have my gym there. So I didn't want to get rid of my car. But as things started to reopen, parking became very difficult. Some of the rules changed as life went back to normal. There were some rules that were suspended during COVID and you were able to park more places. And now that those rules are back to their normal thing, it is very loud right now. Hold on. It's also very loud in the city. You get a lot more ambient noise, as you could hear right there. That was actually a plane. There's an event going on right now, but this is where the events are. You're going to have that noise if you're someone who's considering living in San Francisco. Parking is a disaster, though. And the truth is, because public transportation isn't great, it's hard to get places. So if you want to go places, you have to consider that you either want to live somewhere that you're not going to want to go as many places, or you're going to need a car, or you're going to have to spend time learning the public transportation system and knowing it's going to take you longer than it would if you just Ubered or Lyfted, and that it has limited hours compared to like New York City and the subway. I've lived in New York City for a couple summers, and it's definitely totally different in New York City when it comes to public transportation. If you're moving here hoping that they're going to have a public transportation system like they do in New York City, you're not going to find it. It's not here. So you do have to consider that you're probably going to be spending most of your time in your neighborhood if you don't have a car. There's a lot of great parts of San Francisco, and you can't walk to all of them. It's just not super convenient. And then there's also some places that are not very safe, and you don't want to walk through those to get to the other places. So I just felt very trapped here. And when I mentioned the parking, 2 days ago, I spent 45 minutes looking for parking in my neighborhood. It's maddening. You just get so upset because I pay for a parking permit. I pay to have the ability to park here, and I can't do it because there's so many people trying to park here. It's just miserable. And it makes me almost anxious to leave my house in my car because I just don't know what it's gonna be like. There are times I come back and I find a parking spot in my first loop around the neighborhood, and that's amazing. It always feels like the biggest win in the world. But half the time, I don't, or more than half the time now because of how busy it's getting. And it's just cutting into my day. I'm losing so much time in my day. I did a video, you can see it up here, just about how far I live away from my gym. So going that far away to get to the gym, sorry, my dog's barking. So going that far away to get to the gym means that I just have to drive back, and that's a long drive. And then I get back from that long drive and I can't park my car. And that just makes it really, really difficult to like living here. It just makes it such a challenge, and I either have to give up the gym or give up the apartment. And I am ultimately choosing to give up the apartment, and that's mostly because there's just more things for my lifestyle that I prefer over in the East Bay. And a lot of people just consider the East Bay Oakland. Every time I tell someone I'm moving to the East Bay, they're like, Oakland. There's a lot more in the East Bay than just Oakland. But there are a lot of things in the East Bay. So you do have Oakland, and Alameda and Contra Costa County are two of the biggest counties in the Bay Area. And I think people forget that because it's overshadowed by San Francisco and probably San Jose. But that area, the East Bay, has a ton of things. And I think a lot of people would like it if they saw it, but I think, like me, a lot of people just assume when they're moving to this area for a job to come to the city, and that's what I did. Cost of living here in the city is actually more than the East Bay. That might seem obvious, but even little things like the charge they make you pay for a bag at the grocery store. Here, it's 25 cents here in San Francisco. In the East Bay, at least where I'm moving, it's 10 cents. And it's just crazy that little things like that are that much more expensive here. And the apartment I'm in right now, I might do an apartment tour before I leave, or you'll probably see it after I leave and just show you exactly where my apartment is and what's around it and how much it costs. If you want to see that, make sure you subscribe, because I am pretty positive I'm going to do that. And if you tell me you want to see it, then I'm definitely going to do it. So that is something that's going to be coming up. If you're interested in moving and seeing what San Francisco looks like, subscribe for that. But cost of living here, I am going to be getting more than double the space in the East Bay for almost the same price. So that's also huge for me, because I do have my dog and I want to give him more space. I want to have more space for myself, for my things, for things I want to do, just to have more room to move around. So I'm excited for that. That's something that I'm looking forward to. But if you don't mind the smaller spaces, like my apartment here is 300 square feet, then you might like living here and you might like having less to take care of, less to vacuum. And that could be a plus of living in the city if that's what you think you want to do. Also, another thing I like about the East Bay better, the weather. So if you like the weather being very consistent, San Francisco is the place for you, because it is like 60 degrees, 50 to 65 degrees most of the year. There's a couple days we get into the 70s, which are pretty cool, and everyone loves it. But usually it's just that like 60-degree day. You need a light jacket wherever you go, or a sweatshirt. But over in the East Bay, you get more of like seasons. There really isn't seasons in San Francisco. So the plus is you never really have to check to see what you want to wear. You kind of know what it's going to be like. The con is that I almost forget what month I'm in, because it just becomes so routine that it's going to be the same temperature all year round, that in July, if you go outside, you're gonna need a jacket because it's 50 degrees. But in the East Bay, you do get those seasons. So it gets very warm in the summer and early fall. And in the winter, you have mornings that are in the 30s. And I'm excited for that. I like that it gets really warm, because it's not warm enough in the city to really want to swim or do any of like the summer things. And there in the East Bay, it is warm enough that you want to go to the pool, you want to go to like a lake, like you want to do those things, which I'm excited for. And in the winter, it feels a little bit like winter. In the morning, you can see your breath. And I like having that change and knowing and feeling the seasons. So I am excited for that. And then the East Bay, crimes happen there too. Crimes happen everywhere. There's no completely safe place to live. I've lived in a bunch of markets for my job. I said I was a reporter, and I've worked in Minnesota, I've worked in Arkansas, I've worked in Wisconsin, I've worked in Oklahoma, and now I'm in California, and I grew up in the New Jersey, New York City area. So I've been all over the place, and everywhere is crime. Every single place. But it is a little bit safer out in the East Bay. It tends to be, not necessarily Oakland. Oakland is its own thing. But where I'm going, Contra Costa County, that's the county I'm moving to. That's the county my gym's in. It's a big county. There's like 1.3 million people there, so it's not too specific. Don't get nervous. I'm not giving away my address. But it is a little bit safer. And it feels safer in the sense that walking around the city, you do see open air drug use kind of all the time. Like, I'll put up a picture I saw today of just a bunch of needles on the ground. And I see people doing drugs all the time. I was walking home from work the other day at 10:30, because that's when I'm leaving work, and somebody was shooting up on the sidewalk just a couple, really like less than a block from my apartment. And that is kind of the reality of living in San Francisco. You are going to see that. You are going to see a lot of people experiencing homelessness. And people experiencing homelessness is not necessarily a safety hazard. Just because they're homeless doesn't mean they're criminals. But it sometimes makes you feel uneasy just to have a lot of people living on the streets, different than just living on the streets, but then you have other people open air using drugs. That does happen. You do see that. I'm not saying it's a reason not to live in San Francisco. I've rarely ever had any bad experiences personally. I did have one instance where a homeless person pushed me while I was on TV. So that does happen. Things like that can happen. And I usually have a security guard now when I work out in San Francisco and a lot of other places in the Bay Area, because that's what we need for safety. But I had a friend yesterday who posted that she was robbed by two men wearing masks who took her phone. So that does happen in San Francisco, and I do think it's a little bit more common in the city than in some of the suburban areas. And part of that is just because of numbers, right? There are more people, more crime. And you can't avoid that. The area has a very high density, high population density, so it's just more likely that you're going to live close to somewhere where a major crime has been committed in the city. Some things I have loved about the city that if you're considering moving here, I will highlight for you. There are some great views all over the city. You can see the bridge from some places, and the Bay Bridge specifically is what I live closer to and could see more often, and where my work is closer to, and it is beautiful. Like at night when it's lit up with all the lights, it is very pretty, and you have all these hills, so you'll be walking and you'll like turn a corner and then you'll be able to see the bridge, and it is breathtaking. Like it is very pretty, and that is certainly a pro of living in the city. You're not going to get those views out in the suburbs, at least the suburbs where I'm moving to. So there are some things that I love about living in the city. Also, because of the way the city is set up and the city government, a lot of the apartments, or at least you can find apartments that are rent controlled, like rent stabilized. So you know that your apartment rent can only go up a certain small percentage of the cost of living increase. And also the cost of living increase doesn't really go up because we're in a stable time, then your apartment likely won't go up. My apartment didn't go up one year and then it went up the next one. So that's a plus that I'm really sad to give up. That was one thing that made it really hard to make the decision to move to the East Bay, is because rent stabilized apartments, that's just an amazing thing. You just know what you're gonna get, and you don't always get a huge raise every year, depending on where you work and depending on who you work for. And to know that your apartment isn't going to go up a huge amount is a big relief. So that's one thing that I will say was really hard to give up. I am editing right now, and I realize there's something about rent stabilization that I recently learned that I forgot to say in my original recording. So I'm gonna put that right here.
They might try and force rent-stabilised tenants out by allowing a property to fall into disrepair, or by harassing them with incessant construction until they voluntarily leave.
Now, I had never known about this phenomenon that there's a lot of construction in rent-stabilized units and buildings, but I have experienced it. So it was kind of crazy when I was just watching that Rent episode, not anticipating hearing something that impacts me all the time. But pretty much every morning for the last almost year, since COVID has sort of started to improve, there has been construction in my building, water being turned off, notices on my door. I'm gonna put a clip here of what I wake up to pretty much every day. So that usually starts around 8 o'clock, and I usually sleep till probably 9 because I work until 11 p.m. So I don't get home till later. So I usually sleep in a little bit later, but pretty much Monday through Friday, I'm being woken up by saws and hammers, and it's gone on for months, and it's kind of crazy. And I just thought it was my building, but it was interesting hearing this from John Oliver that it might not just be my building. It might be something that you have to be aware of if you're looking at San Francisco and looking at a rent stabilized apartment. Back to the video. But I truly believe this move to the East Bay and being closer to the things that I value is going to be the right move. And I likely won't be back in the city, but never say never. I am open to see what life has in store, and I'm going to be sharing that here with all of you, and I appreciate all of you who are with me on this journey. One thing I will miss about living in the city too is that I've had more people here bump into me and be like, I see you on Cron 4, or I see you on YouTube. I had someone today who stopped me and told me he was a subscriber, and I might not get as many of those interactions, which will be a little bit sad, but I'm still gonna be here all the time. My work is based here. I don't have to be here every day for work because I'm a reporter, and sometimes my stories take me elsewhere, and I'll be able to go straight from my new place. So I'm not here every day, but I'll still be here every week, I'm sure. So I do really like San Francisco. I love the Bay Area. I'm so grateful that my journey has taken me here, but it's time for something new. I've spent about half of my contract here in San Francisco, and I'm gonna do the second half elsewhere, and I'm excited to show you that journey. So I appreciate all of you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Also, this guy has been asking for attention the entire video. So, Carson, look at the camera. Look at the camera. All right, gonna give him attention now. Thank you for being patient. Bye. See you later.